My name is Claire. I'm 29 years old, and I work as a dental hygienist in a small town just outside Nashville, Tennessee. 3 weeks ago, I was curled up on the couch with my father, sharing a bowl of buttered popcorn and watching an old black and white mystery film when my aunt suddenly called. Her voice was trembling so badly I could barely understand her. "Claire, honey, you need to sit down. Your father just had a massive heart attack at the grocery store. He's in the ER right now. They're taking him into emergency surgery. Please, baby, get here fast." I actually let out a small, confused laugh. I looked at my father, who was reaching for another handful of popcorn, and I said softly into the phone, "Aunt Marlene, that can't be right. Dad is sitting right next to me. We're watching a movie together." But she wouldn't stop. She kept repeating, "Claire, I'm looking at him through the window of the operating room. The paramedics brought him in 20 minutes ago. You have to come now." So I went. And when I reached St. Thomas Medical Center, my entire body started shaking so hard I couldn't hold my car keys. Before I tell you what I actually saw that night, please hit that subscribe button, tap the little bell, and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Now let me take you back to the beginning. 3 weeks ago, my life looked exactly like it had for the past several years. Quiet, predictable, comfortable. After my mother passed away from cancer when I was 24, my father and I grew closer than ever. He had been the steady rock of our family, a retired high school history teacher with kind brown eyes and a laugh that filled every room he entered. After Mom died, I moved back into my childhood home in Franklin to help him through the grief. 5 years later, I was still there. Not because he needed me anymore, but because I genuinely loved our life together. We had our routines. Sunday pancakes, Thursday movie nights. Long walks with our old golden retriever, Biscuit, around the neighborhood park. That particular Thursday felt like any other. It was late October, and the air smelled like fallen leaves and the cinnamon candles Dad insisted on burning all through fall. We were watching The Third Man, one of his favorite classics. He was wearing the soft gray cardigan I had given him for his birthday, and his reading glasses were perched low on his nose. Biscuit was snoring at our feet. Then my phone buzzed on the coffee table. Aunt Marlene's name lit up the screen. She was my father's younger sister, and she lived about 40 minutes away in Murfreesboro. We weren't particularly close, but she called every few weeks to check in. I picked up, expecting small talk. Instead, I got the words that would crack my life in half. "Claire, baby, are you sitting down?" My stomach tightened immediately. "Aunt Marlene, what's wrong?" "It's your father. He collapsed at the Publix on Murfreesboro Road about 20 minutes ago. A stranger performed CPR until the ambulance arrived. They've got him at St. Thomas now. Claire, they said it was a massive heart attack. He's in surgery. You have to come." I remember my mouth going dry. I remember the popcorn suddenly tasting like cardboard. And I remember turning my head slowly to look at my father, who was watching the movie, completely unaware, completely alive, his chest rising and falling with gentle breaths. "Aunt Marlene," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I think there's been a terrible mistake. Dad is right here. He's been on the couch with me all evening. We haven't left the house." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then my aunt said, very quietly, "Claire, I am standing outside the operating room right now. I drove here the moment the hospital called me. I was listed as his emergency contact backup. Honey, I can see him through the glass. It's him. I know my own brother." My father noticed the change in my face. He paused the movie, turning toward me with concern. "Claire? Sweetheart, what's happening? Who is that?" I handed him the phone, my fingers going numb. He took it and spoke calmly, asking questions, listening, nodding slowly. His expression shifted from confusion to something I couldn't quite read. After a minute, he handed the phone back to me. "Honey," he said gently, "I think there's been some kind of mix-up at the hospital. Maybe someone who looks similar, maybe they pulled the wrong ID. These things happen sometimes. Go check it out, calm your aunt down, and call me the second you have answers. I'll stay here with Biscuit." Something in me wanted to argue, wanted to say, this doesn't make sense. Why would I leave you behind when you're the person they're asking about? But his voice was so calm, so reasonable. He kissed the top of my head the way he always did when I was stressed, and he said, "Go on, Claire Bear. It'll be fine." I grabbed my keys and ran. The drive to the hospital felt like it lasted hours, though it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I kept telling myself it was a clerical error. A stranger with the same name. A wallet someone had stolen. Any explanation that would let me breathe again. Aunt Marlene was waiting for me in the surgical wing lobby, her face swollen from crying. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like her rose perfume, and she whispered, "I'm so glad you're here. The surgeon came out 10 minutes ago. The surgery went okay. He's in recovery now." A nurse in navy scrubs approached us. "Miss Claire Whitmore?" "Yes. I'm so sorry for what you're going through. Your father is stable. Would you like to see him?" She led us down a corridor that smelled sharply of antiseptic, past curtained rooms and beeping monitors. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. She stopped at a room near the end of the hall and pulled back the curtain. And there, lying in the hospital bed, was my father. Same silver hair, slightly tousled, same soft lines around his eyes. Same small mole on his left cheekbone. The little scar on his chin from the biking accident he had when he was 14. His hands, folded on his chest, had the same calloused fingertips from decades of gardening. On his left ring finger, he still wore the simple gold wedding band he had never taken off since my mother died. My knees actually buckled. Aunt Marlene grabbed my elbow to steady me. "Dad?" I whispered. His eyes fluttered open, and when he saw me, tears welled up in them. "Claire Bear," he breathed. His voice weak and raspy. "You came." That was my father's voice. The exact voice. The exact words he had called me since I was 3 years old. Words that only he used. Words that no stranger could possibly know. I stumbled backward out of the room, feeling the walls tilt. Aunt Marlene followed me into the hallway, holding me up. "Claire, honey, what's wrong? What's happening?" "Marlene," I said, my voice barely audible, "1 hour ago, I left my father sitting on our couch. Alive. Eating popcorn. Talking to me. Warm, breathing, real. And now he's lying in that bed. So who is in our house right now? Who have I been living with?" Her face went completely pale. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said carefully, "Claire, listen to me. Don't go home tonight. Stay with me, we'll figure this out together." But I couldn't process that yet. My mind was spinning too fast. I had to call the man at home. I had to hear his voice. I had to understand. I stepped outside into the cold parking lot and dialed the house. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Claire Bear, is everything okay over there?" The pet name hit me like a slap. Claire Bear. The man in the hospital had just called me that. And now this voice, which sounded identical, was calling me that too. "The person in the hospital," I said carefully, watching my breath fog in the October air. "He looks exactly like you." There was a small chuckle on the other end of the phone. "Well, that's strange, sweetheart. You know identical strangers happen sometimes. There was a whole documentary about it. Come home when you're done, and we'll figure it out tomorrow. I'm making you tea." He hung up before I could answer. I stood in that parking lot for almost 30 minutes, staring at nothing. Finally, I forced myself back into the hospital. I sat by the bedside of the man who claimed to be my father. I studied every inch of his face. I watched him breathe. I listened to the machine's beep. And everything about him, every detail, matched the man I had known my entire life. But the man at home had just called me Claire Bear too. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me down. Aunt Marlene offered her guest room, but something in me, something stupid and stubborn, said I had to go home. Because if the man in the hospital really was my father, then who was the other one? And if the other one was dangerous, I couldn't just leave him in the house where all our family photos lived, where my mother's jewelry was still kept in the dresser, where every piece of my history sat within reach. When I walked in the front door, he was waiting in the kitchen. He turned to me with a warm smile, holding out a ceramic mug of chamomile tea, just the way I liked it. "Oh, sweetheart, you look exhausted. Come sit. Tell me everything." I forced my face into something that looked like relief. I took the mug. I sat at the kitchen table with him, and I told him a version of the story. I said the man at the hospital was a stranger who just happened to resemble him, that the hospital had made a mistake with the wallet, that everything was fine now. He nodded slowly, stroking Biscuit's head. What a nightmare for that poor family, though. Can you imagine if it really had been me? I watched him, looking for something wrong. Anything wrong. He knew my favorite tea. He remembered to put honey, not sugar. He asked about my day. He laughed at our inside jokes. He called Biscuit by the nickname only Dad used, Biscuit Boy. I went to bed that night in my childhood bedroom, and I locked the door for the first time since I was 16. The next 2 weeks were the strangest of my life. I went to work. I came home. I ate dinner with the man who called himself my father. I visited the hospital secretly on my lunch breaks, watching the recovering man regain his strength. 2 fathers. 2 realities. 2 loves. And I could not, for the life of me, tell which one was real. The hospital father was weaker, obviously, because of the surgery. But his memories were flawless. He asked about Biscuit. He asked if I had remembered to water my mother's rose bushes this month. He mentioned a card game we had played on my 8th birthday, a specific game with specific rules we had invented together. The home father was stronger, livelier, and also knew everything. He remembered my mother's favorite hymn. He remembered the name of my 3rd grade teacher. He remembered the smell of his own father's pipe tobacco from 50 years ago. The only differences were so small I kept dismissing them. The home father sometimes paused just a fraction of a second too long before answering certain questions. His left-handed habits seemed slightly off, as if he sometimes forgot which hand he favored. He winced at a song on the radio that my actual father loved. But whenever I started to doubt him, he would do something unmistakably Dad. He would quote his favorite line from It's a Wonderful Life. He would fix the squeaky hinge on the back door without being asked. He would call Biscuit over and scratch him exactly behind the left ear, which was the one spot Biscuit loved best. I started to wonder if I was losing my mind. I tried to tell myself that maybe the hospital father really was a stranger. Maybe some elaborate coincidence. Maybe a long-lost twin I never knew about, separated at birth, sharing my father's mannerisms through some miracle of genetics. I was drowning, and I knew it. Then, on the 15th day, Aunt Marlene called me. Her voice was different. Low. Careful, Claire. I need you to come to my house. Tonight. Alone. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Especially not the man living in your house. Tell him you're working late. I lied to the father at home. I said I had a late patient appointment. He kissed my forehead and told me to drive safely. I drove to Murfreesboro with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Aunt Marlene opened the door and pulled me inside quickly, locking it behind us. Her kitchen table was covered in papers, folders, and an open laptop. She poured me a glass of water and sat across from me. Claire, I need to show you something, and I need you to stay calm. Can you do that? I nodded, though I was anything but calm. She turned the laptop toward me. The screen showed grainy footage from what looked like a small private clinic. A reception area. A waiting room. I have a friend who works in medical records at a clinic in Memphis. I've been calling her every day since this happened, asking her to search for anything unusual. Any patient who might match our situation. Yesterday she found this. The video played. A man walked into the clinic wearing a baseball cap pulled low and dark sunglasses. He sat in the waiting area, filling out paperwork. After a while, a nurse called him back. Before he stood up, he removed his cap to wipe his forehead. I gasped so hard my throat hurt. It was Uncle Raymond, my father's older brother. The uncle I had seen at every Christmas since I was born. The uncle who had been estranged from our family for the past 6 years after a falling out with Dad over Grandpa's inheritance. The uncle I had assumed was just being his usual bitter, distant self. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." Aunt Marlene clicked through more footage. Different days. Different appointments, pre-op consultations, post-op recovery photos in his file. And then, photo after photo, the slow transformation. Cheekbones reshaped, jaw adjusted. A slight alteration to the nose. Hair dyed and styled into my father's exact silver gray part, even a tiny mole carefully placed on the left cheekbone. "They specialize in cosmetic reconstructive surgery," Aunt Marlene said quietly. My friend pulled his records through a legal favor she's going to have to explain later. Raymond has been visiting this clinic for almost 2 years. 2 years of surgeries. 2 years of preparation. And Claire, there's more. She pulled up a document. Financial records. Wire transfers. Bank statements. Raymond has been quietly investigating your father's finances for years. Your grandfather left the majority of his estate to your dad because Raymond had a gambling problem back in the 90s. Your dad has been collecting the inheritance income ever since. Raymond has been drowning in debt. 6 months ago, he took out a huge loan against a property he doesn't even own anymore. Claire, the accident wasn't an accident. My breath caught in my throat. What do you mean? She handed me another printed sheet. There was a witness at the Publix. A teenage girl restocking shelves. She told police she saw a man in a dark hoodie slip something into your father's cart. She didn't think anything of it at the time. The paramedics ran a talk screen when they got to the ER because the heart attack symptoms didn't quite match his health history. They found traces of a drug that induces cardiac events in older adults. It's nearly undetectable if you don't know to look for it. I covered my mouth with my hand. Tears were already falling. Claire, your uncle tried to kill your father. And when your father survived the surgery, Raymond moved forward with the second part of the plan. He took your father's place in your home. He has been using his new face, his stolen identity, to position himself for something. We don't know exactly what yet, but I think he's trying to get legal access to your father's assets. Maybe even the house. I sat there for a long time, unable to speak. My hands were trembling, my whole body felt cold. Then I started to cry. Not just because of the horror of what he had done, but because I had sat across from that man at breakfast. I had hugged him, I had trusted him. I had let him kiss my forehead. And the whole time, he was the man who had tried to murder my father. Aunt Marlene held me while I sobbed. When I finally stopped, she said, "Claire, we have to be smart. If we confront him now, he could disappear with your father's identity intact, or worse, he could come back to finish what he started. We need to build a case. We need to catch him completely. Are you strong enough to go back into that house and pretend nothing has changed?" I wiped my eyes. I took a long, slow breath. I thought about my real father lying in that hospital bed, still too weak to speak for more than a few minutes at a time. I thought about my mother's memory. I thought about everything my family had been through. I nodded. Yes, I'll do it. But I'm going to need help. For the next 8 days, I became an actress. I smiled at Raymond every morning. I made him coffee. I asked about his day. I kissed his cheek before bed. And every single time I did, I wanted to throw up. But I also gathered evidence. Aunt Marlene connected me with a private investigator named Darnell Brooks, a quiet, methodical man in his 50s who had spent 20 years with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation before going private. He walked me through exactly what to do. I placed tiny audio recorders around the house. I documented every conversation where Raymond slipped up. I noticed, now that I was paying attention, that he stumbled on details he shouldn't have. He forgot the name of my mother's favorite song. He got the year of my college graduation wrong by 1. He didn't remember which side of the bed my mother had slept on. These were things I had dismissed before, but now I cataloged them all. I also started quietly copying financial documents. Raymond had been pushing, almost from the moment I went to the hospital that first night, for me to help him contact Dad's attorney. He said it was because if anything ever happened, we needed to make sure the paperwork was in order. He wanted to add himself to accounts. He wanted joint access. He was pushing for a power of attorney meeting. I played along. I told him yes, let's schedule it. I told him I agreed. It was smart to be prepared. Meanwhile, I visited the real hospital every lunch break. My father was getting stronger every day. I told him everything, slowly, piece by piece, as his strength allowed. He cried when I told him about Raymond. He had always loved his brother, even through the estrangement. And yet a part of him, he admitted, had not been surprised. Together, we planned. The meeting with the attorney was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon at a firm in downtown Nashville. Raymond was glowing all morning. He kept saying things like, "This will be such a relief, knowing everything is organized." He had no idea. I wore a soft cream blouse and my mother's pearl earrings. I drove us to the office. Raymond sat in the passenger seat, chatting about the weather, about Biscuit, about what we should have for dinner that night. When we arrived, we were ushered into a conference room on the 17th floor. The attorney, a sharp woman named Patricia Keller, greeted us both warmly and set a thick folder of documents in front of each of us. Raymond reached for a pen immediately. I placed my hand gently over the papers. "Before we sign anything," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm, "I have a short video I need everyone in this room to watch. It's very important." Patricia raised an eyebrow but nodded. Raymond smiled uncertainly. I turned the screen of the large monitor on the wall toward us. I pressed play. The footage began. The clinic in Memphis. A man in a cap walking in. Removing the cap. Raymond's unaltered face looking up at the camera. Raymond's smile froze. The footage continued. Surgery photos. Recovery photos. The slow transformation. Raymond's breathing became shallow. I clicked to the next file. Financial documents. His debts. The wire transfers to the clinic. Raymond stood up suddenly, his chair scraping hard against the floor. "Claire. Sweetheart. What is this? Where did you get this? This isn't what it looks like." Patricia was staring at the screen, her mouth slightly open. I clicked to the final file. The toxicology report from the ER. The witness statement from the Publix. The police report. Raymond lunged for the door. It opened before he reached it. Two detectives from the Williamson County Sheriff's Department walked in, along with Darnell Brooks. They had been waiting in the hallway all along. One of them placed a hand on Raymond's shoulder and said, "Mr. Raymond Whitmore, you are under arrest for attempted murder, identity fraud, conspiracy, and financial exploitation." Raymond collapsed into the nearest chair, his head in his hands. He didn't even try to fight. I watched him from across the room, and for the first time in weeks, I felt my shoulders relax. The trial took several months. The evidence was overwhelming. Raymond's own hired surgeons testified, some of them under immunity deals. His financial trail was indisputable. The drug used to induce my father's heart attack was traced directly back to a pharmaceutical contact Raymond had made through his gambling circles. The witness from the Publix identified him in a lineup. He was sentenced to 45 years in state prison. No possibility of parole for the first 30. When the judge read the verdict, I held my father's hand tightly in the front row. Dad had recovered enough by then to attend every court date. He wore the same gray cardigan I had given him for his birthday. When Raymond was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, my father didn't look at him. He looked at me, and he whispered, "Claire Bear, I'm so proud of you." I cried harder than I had in years. Not from fear anymore. Not from confusion, from pure, aching relief. We went home that night. Our real home. The one that finally belonged to the right people again. Biscuit met us at the door, his tail wagging so hard his whole back end moved. Dad knelt down and scratched him behind the left ear, exactly the way Biscuit loved. And for the first time in weeks, I watched my real father do it, and I knew for certain it was him. I made chamomile tea. I added honey, not sugar. We sat at the kitchen table, Dad in his cardigan, Biscuit at our feet, and we didn't speak for a long time. We just sat together, breathing the same air, under the same roof, the way we were always meant to. Before I end this, I want to say something to anyone out there who has ever felt that something was wrong, but couldn't quite name it. Trust that feeling. Trust the small things, the tiny pauses, the details that don't quite fit. Your intuition is older and wiser than your doubts. It knows things your logical mind can't prove yet. And if someone ever tries to steal your life by wearing a face you love, remember this. The people who truly love you live in 1,000 tiny details no amount of surgery can ever steal. The way they say your name, the songs they know by heart, the small, unshowy kindnesses they do when no one is watching. Love leaves fingerprints that no imposter can copy. If this story moved you, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to HeartPath Stories for more real stories about family, survival, and the strength we find in the most impossible moments. Tell me in the comments, have you ever sensed that something wasn't right about a person close to you? I read every single one. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of the people you love. Because you never really know how precious they are until you almost lose them.